Welcome to the On Par podcast from Winners Award Group showroom here in Coconut Creek, Florida. I'm your host, Drew D. Alberto, and we're doing something very different today. We typically are a break from the political world and all the stuff going on that you see that's negative, because that's what sells commercials. We're actually going to talk some politics. I actually met Chris Eddy, our guest, through the game of golf at 6 Degrees Golf.
Yeah,
and
you're rich.
We have some similar acquaintances and now friends in common. And I'm probably not the guy that should be talking politics, but obviously there's stuff that just affect us as regular human beings.
And what did I say before we started?
You said inflation.
But I called you a name that I think you didn't like, that I considered you normal.
Yeah, you did call me normal, which is, I've been called a lot of things, but
Most people don't follow politics and know all the intricate issues.
Yeah. Well, you hear from the people that do, right? On every side,
and
the people that say they're in the middle.
and the silent majority always wins out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always pocketbook issues.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, and if I'm being honest, I would say I'm probably someone who votes their wallet more than anything else because I'm a business owner and a small business owner at that. And, there's... taxes is one of the big, taxes, and now hyperinflation because, my wife was even complaining the other day about how a $200 grocery bill is now a $600 grocery bill. I
heard this from a friend that is very frugal. Him and his wife used to spend $100. Now it's $220. Yeah. Just 3 years later. And, my wife does a majority of the shopping for our family.
Same here.
And I hear it.
It's in my contract. I'll do chores. I'll mow everything. I'll plant any plants she wants to put in the garden. But, when it comes to grocery shopping, I'm not the guy you want.
Well, I come home with some double stuffed Oreos.
Some crap I don't need. Exactly. So, yeah, that's in my contract as well. I don't really do much of the grocery shopping unless it's to... And, Restaurant Depot doesn't pay me for this, but I love going to Restaurant Depot and getting, good fresh meat.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, we're going to go visit them as a
sponsor. I was going to say, I noticed you actually posted some, now that we're on the subject of food somehow, you posted something about some of the cleanest restaurants in Davie, which is a town that I happen to live in. Yeah. And have for the past 5 years. And I grew up down the street in Cooper City, your district, of course. Yes. Don't really know too much about local politics, but obviously I presume that visiting all these local businesses, you've met some awesome people and gotten feedback. So what are other business owners even concerned about? Like, why would they care to vote for Chris Eddy instead of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's been in that seat for, I don't know, I think I was going to say I was a kid still when she got elected the first time.
Yeah, a lot of it. Some know my background. I'm a retired Air Force Brigadier General out of the reserves and retired FBI leader. I led Miami's intelligence program here in South Florida for a number of years. And we ended up being the number one ranked FBI intelligence program out of 56 nationwide when I retired. So I wanted to retire on top since my wife had retired a year before me from the FBI as well. So some of the people know that background. I'm a city commissioner at Weston, teach at FIU. Others say, boy, you're the guy that goes to all the businesses. Because when I became commissioner, I started talking to the businesses to see what struggles they were having with the city. And luckily in Weston, not too much. But then they started saying, prices are going up. Our favorite pizza place in Weston kept saying, well, I can't raise the price of my pizza more than $1, even though my cheese price tripled. So they're month to month, a lot of these businesses. So what I'd like to do is highlight new businesses anywhere in my district, from Weston all the way to Hollywood, below 595. So it's pretty much South Broward. If I hear about a business or somebody contacts me, I like to go out there and meet them and say, how easy was it for you to get open? And unfortunately, with a lot of these cities and the permit and the slowness of it, and bureaucracy, it takes them a year to get open. And they're paying rent. And they're not making any income. And it's so frustrating for them. So the bureaucracy is part of it. The other is the cost of goods goes up for them. And more importantly, the cost of labor. And they can't recover that off the menu prices. So many of them are month to month. So I try to go out and highlight them on social media. Hey, this new restaurant opened. Come visit them. I just did that for Burton's in the fountains, near the fountains in Plantation. And it got hundreds and hundreds of likes because people like to know new restaurants in the area.
Yeah.
One guy chimed in that said, "Get this ugly guy off my Facebook page. I'm never voting for him."
Okay, that's fair. I mean,
So I
you're
said,
not
"You know
going to
what?
keep all the people happy all the time. That's impossible.
My wife thinks I'm ugly, and she might not even vote for me. So I'm working hard to get her vote.
I don't believe anything that
the
last part was political speak. I don't know. I don't know if I believe any of that. But
same thing though for the healthy restaurants, the clean restaurants. The Sun Sentinel publishes them, but not many people.
So you were on the podcast one other time with Sean and I, and you kind of told and shared with us that you decided to run because you were yelling at the TV so much that your kids and your wife said, "Well, why don't you continue your life of service to the United States? You're a veteran, you're a former FBI guy. Go ahead and continue." That's what you told us last time. So
quit complaining and do something about it.
What was your biggest complaint when you saw it and you were like, "Holy crap, this is wrong in every way," and somebody needs to do something, and then that somebody became you now?
There are three things.
Please tell me.
First one, 2 years ago, this government administration sent $400 million to the Middle East to improve their border security. To the Middle East to improve their border security. Meanwhile, the second thing was our borders wide open. Unvetted people coming in from all over, including unaccompanied children. Last year, 110,000 8-year-old girls, 12-year-old girls, unaccompanied kids.
Yeah.
They show up with a phone number. So Border Protection calls that number, says, "Oh yeah, I'm her uncle." Okay, great. We have to stay in touch. And New York Times did an expose on what happens to these kids, and labor trafficking is not the worst thing that happens to these kids.
Yeah.
And last year, DHS lost track of 85,000 of these kids. So that disturbed me, the open border. And finally, what really said I got to do something was the student loan repayment plan. Because I don't know about most people listening, but I had to work my way through college, join the ROTC my last 2 years to afford. Everybody I know paid off their own loans or worked their way through. And now the government's picking winners and losers, and to the tune of $1 trillion. So this administration seems to be more concerned about student loan payments and Social Security payments, which is going broke.
So here's my big picture question of the whole situation of how all that stuff goes on, because I saw something the other day that said if 100% of the people are in favor of a bill, it has a 30% chance of passing, and if 0% of the people are in favor of a bill, it has a 30% chance of passing. So if the government's supposed to represent the people's interests and their priorities, which we'll get into some of the things that, these new bills keep popping up all the time, and I don't think that any of that stuff is a priority for, let's say, 95 or maybe 99% of us in a lot of cases. So how the heck do you go, and you're running against someone who's been raising money in politics and been in that seat in let's say a territory that votes more towards her side than your side.
Yeah,
generally speaking.
Historically, yep.
So, what makes you think like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to win this thing first of all.
Right.
And then once I get there, I'm going to be uncorruptible and still want to do the things that, let's say, your business owner friends and your constituents and guys like me who are just regular guy running a business, doing a podcast, managing my family of a wife and 2 kids, kind of like an average American, if you will. How do you stay true to, let's say, representing the people that you want to represent?
Well, for the first part, why do I think I'm going to win?
Please.
I ran for city commissioner in Weston 4 years ago. Ran a very short race because I got in the last minute, and we won with the most votes in city history in a 3-person race. And these other 2 candidates had been running for a year already. I was out fundraised 7-1. Doesn't matter, people waste money when you fundraise. So we just out hustled them, and our message was better, and people wanted more normal people in politics.
Yeah.
And we've had some success in modifying some of our business ordinances, given not raising taxes in Weston, business taxes or property taxes in 7 years now. So I know I can win because of a lot of data that I look at and how the trends are turning, and we can get into that. But how do I not become corruptible? I think you have to not need this job.
Okay.
A lot of these politicians get in there when they're 30s, and this is their whole life being in Congress. And this is what happens. And a lot of your listeners won't know this, and Senator Scott told us this. Mm-hmm. When you go up to Washington, they say, okay, you're a Republican now? Okay, good. You got to vote on these bills. And if you don't, we're not going to support you in your next campaign, and we're going to fund a primary opponent against you. And that's what happened to Senator Scott. They essentially blackballed him because he voted, his very first vote was against a Republican bill. Because he says, this is not good for my state. I'm not voting for it. So he stood strong. Why? Because he doesn't need this job. And people recognize that you're doing it representing your district. Too many politicians get up to Washington, they represent the Washington district and not their own district.
I'm the first person to throw politicians under the bus. You know this about. I shared that with you in our first meeting. I don't care if there's a R or a D next to their name. If they've been in office a long time, they shouldn't be a career politician, first of all, which is my dad's old school Kennedy Democrat that he still carries his Democrat card because, Kennedy was it for that generation, and a lot of Reagan was really it.
Yeah.
But my dad is kind of that perfect example of that old school, and now it just seems like everything's money driven. And sure. I'm a lender for 18 years before I changed careers, and if I look at the money and dollars don't add up, I'm raising the red flags.
Yeah.
So
it's true. It is money driven. The extremists on both sides have kind of taken over the media portion of it.
Because that's what sells commercials.
Yeah, who wants to interview somebody like me that's boring, except for you?
Listen, I just want people in there that are actually regular human beings and not, politician puppets.
And I'm a term limit guy. I signed the term limit pledge, and I don't know if it's 3 terms. I think 3 terms.
How do you get that passed?
It's got to be through the Constitution.
People are going to vote themselves out? There's no way, right?
But somebody's got to start it.
Yeah.
Right? So you get like-minded people like me, and there's others there that realize there's a reason people don't want to retire from politics is their ego's so big they think nobody could do this but me. But when you're a general officer, when I was a general, they rotate you every 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
And you got to make an impact quickly because somebody's going to be sitting in your seat very shortly, a year or two later. So you only have a limited amount of time. Once they get up there, they think nobody could do this job but me, and the power, obviously, and they like to be called a congressman, congresswoman. I've had my job titles. I've had my money. I don't really need that. I'm happy to stay home and play with my kids and my dog, but I think this is a higher calling. Somebody's got to do something to get this country on a fiscally sound track. We are in danger, and now I'm seeing more and more articles about it, thankfully. One was I just posted today. People recognize our $35 trillion debt is not sustainable. Our debt goes up $1 trillion almost a year now.
Well, we printed more money in the last, 5 years than we did in the last 245 before that?
Yeah. And the Democrats will say tax, tax, tax. We don't have a tax problem, we have a spending problem.
Well, obviously.
That's the biggest thing.
We just sent billions of dollars around the world, and like you said, we've got higher taxes, higher insurance rates, higher everything costs more. So what if you could and let's stay local for a second.
Sure.
Broward County, for example, and you're running against the incumbent, 20 years in office.
Yep.
So what do you like? What is your intent? Like, what would you change if you could wave a magic wand and nobody else could make the decision?
Yeah.
What are 2 or 3 top things that you would say locally? These things make a difference. They've been messed up for a long time. And that's why we need a change.
There's 2 types of people. That's what my dad told me. There's doers and talkers.
Okay.
Don't be a talker, be a doer.
Okay.
So a lot of people in Washington, AOC and the rest, they're talkers. They don't get any legislation passed. Sure. They don't try to improve. They just sit there and go, we need
sell
this.
Commercials because it's all acts.
Talk,
yeah,
right?
Of course.
So you need to be a doer. So what would I focus on? I'd focus on we got to get back to a balanced budget. You have to figure out that trajectory to get there. It's not sustainable as a country to be in this debt. Last year...
But, that could be as simple as don't waste money on stupid stuff.
Yeah, but you get all these politicians who want to bring projects home. And I know my opponent, she says, oh, look, we got all this money to build a county courthouse from the federal government. Well, that's a county courthouse. Why is some lady in Social Security in Iowa helping to pay for a Broward County courthouse? right? Because you got to bring home the bacon.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I don't do earmarks. I won't do earmarks, and Senator Scott doesn't do earmarks. If Florida wants something, Florida can pay for it. If Weston wants something, Weston can pay for it.
Okay.
That's one way to start. You got to lead by example. Last year, we spent $800 billion on interest on the debt. Interest. So I follow this stuff because I'm a dork and a nerd. I'm a data guy. So 65% of our budget goes to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security.
Okay.
In 9 years, that goes to 95% of our entire federal budget. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt. So you hear that? What's anybody talking about it? Nobody's talking about it, and nobody's doing anything about it. Oh, let's have a commission to study, to think about, to plan on.
Do something.
And if we just went back to what we were spending as a country 5 years ago, we'd have a balanced budget.
Well, that was my argument against working in corporate America for myself for any length of time is, we had meetings to talk about conference calls and conference calls to talk about the meeting.
Yes.
But very few people out of the 120 that were in that meeting did anything.
So multiply that times 1 million,
and that's what.
And that's our federal government.
No, and that's the problem. I mean, and again, you'd almost have to have a president come in and do an executive order and say, "Hey, look, you're all under financial investigation because you've been on the take for 10, 15, 20, 30 years," or some kind of crazy second civil war like the people against the government.
Yeah,
and short of those two
if
things,
you saw what they did in Latin America recently with a country down there that they said, "All right, we got to quit spending money." Mm-hmm. And you know what they did? They quit spending money. They did away with agencies. They did away with personnel.
Yeah.
We have to go through the process to do that here to say, do we really need this many people?
So how does that get started? I mean, at a
Congress
local...
controls the purse strings.
Okay.
So you got to get enough congressional members to say, you know what? Do you really need to grow 12% in your agency? How about staying at your current level for 5 years?
Yeah.
Can you do that? I don't know what you did in your household, but we had to cut back these last few years, right? Why doesn't the government have to cut back if we have to cut back?
Well, they just keep printing more money, though. That's why we keep spending more, because everything costs more when you keep printing.
A great example, you say stay local, is the problem with education, and that's funded by our local taxes predominantly. In the last 60 years in the United States, our student population doubled, our teacher population tripled, which is nice. Our administrative side went up 700%. So why can't we cut some of that and give that money to the teachers and let them teach?
Well, the way the government is run in the first place is backwards of that anyway, right? Because if you don't spend all your budget, you get a lower budget the next year, and they're fighting each other for the same money, and then they just make more of it.
We had that in the military at the end of the fiscal year, which ours ended in the end of September. Hey, you got to buy paper, pens, and stock up for next year. Otherwise,
you don't get those same budget next year.
They tried to go to a multi-year budgeting in the U.S. government. It just failed.
They can't even get 1 year right. Budget, how can they do multi-year?
And they do an omnibus, and people don't want to vote against it. That's why I like Congressman Mask.
That's kind of the same as in golf when Coach Sean tells me that you got to learn the right technique and practice it, and anything short of that, you're just practicing junk.
Yeah, that's right.
So now okay, we can't get 1 year right. Let's do 6.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. That's like swinging the club left-handed upside down and expecting to get better.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
The difference between golf and the government, in golf you have golf pros, experts that know what they're doing. Right. And all these economic experts that say, "Oh, we're surprised that the economy shrank. We're surprised." You study this every day, and you're surprised every 3 months. How do you still have a job?
Supply and demand is very difficult to understand. There's like 2 X's. It's very, very complex.
And in fact, the last employment report that came out, like, "Oh, jobs are growing." Okay, but if you read it, those were part-time jobs. There was actually fewer full-time jobs. So people have to pick up more part-time jobs to make the same amount of money.
Well, employment is something that is an anomaly to me. I spent 8 years of my career in headhunting and recruiting, and more on the business development side, so dealing with the business owners. And one of the reasons I left was because it seemed like all these big companies were hiring when they weren't. And then you got a generation that has a stereotype, if you will, for being lazy and entitled and, not knowing how to do things because they're always stuck in their phone. And I found it to be fairly confusing as middle market companies were hiring, which I thought was great, and small businesses were hiring, but they were being very selective because in a small company, one bad hire could cost you, 10 times what you should have.
Right.
So, but I found that, there's more jobs actually really available than there are people wanting to work.
Yeah, for sure.
So how... how is it that still exists? Is that there's money getting funneled to people still, or what's going on?
Well, a lot of it's credit card. So our credit card debt in this nation, $1.3 trillion in credit card debt, which goes up. And the delinquency rate and the interest rates on credit cards, both are all-time high. That's not a good trend. So people are living off their credit cards,
and
now they're going bankrupt and being delinquent to maintain their standard of living. I don't want to decry the work ethic because there are a lot of young people that are out there hustling, working hard. It's just tough for them to get ahead, and they get discouraged. They go, why would I work this hard and work 80 hours a week? I can't even afford to buy a home.
Barely surviving, yeah.
And I'm barely saying, what's the benefit of it? Why don't I just work half of that and barely survive rather than double that and barely survive?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hearing over and over. It's that distrust that things are actually going to get better. This is the first generation in American history where their parents didn't think that their kids are going to have a better life than them.
Okay.
Generally, that's what you want for your kids. Oh, my kids are going to have it great because this new technology is coming. Now parents are concerned their kids are not going to be as better off in the United States.
Yeah.
And the faith in the federal government is at an all-time low. Patriotism's all-time low. Spirituality's all-time low. This does not bode well for the future. And we need to get a handle on this and fix it.
So what's the fastest way? I mean, I know logic and reason and linear thinking makes sense a lot of times, unless you're talking to somebody who's so emotionally charged that they're not going to hear anything. I mean, and it's the same as you go home and have an argument with your spouse or one of your kids, and they're feeling wildly emotional about something, or you're feeling wildly emotional, and it's really difficult to get that linear logic across.
Yeah.
So how do you change the minds of somebody that, let's say my mom, for example, that's been living in Cooper City for the last 40 whatever years, and her and my dad have always traditionally voted for the letter next to the person's name, Democrat, right? So how do you convince somebody that's been voting for this lady who's been in there for 20 years and they voted for probably every time? How do you flip their way of thinking and win them as a voter?
A couple ways that we do it. In fact, my wife and I went door knocking today.
All right.
In Davie. And my wife ran into somebody. She goes, I like Debbie because she has curly hair like me. All right, well, I can't help it.
I was going to say, you don't have curly hair.
I had curly hair in my teenage years.
You and I have a very similar hairstyle. Well,
So, you know what? How do you convince somebody like that? So we often say, well, what has gotten better for you personally and your family in the last few years? Give me some examples. Is the economy better? Is the border better? Is our foreign policy better? Our
the school board better?
Is the school? Yeah. What's gotten better? And it gets them to think. And when they say, well, I'm going to vote for President Biden, I go, okay, when you vote for President Biden, you're voting for President Kamala Harris. That's what's going to happen in the next 4 years, either voluntarily or involuntarily. And it causes them to think a little bit. So you got to get them to crank those other brain cells, that not the emotion side, but the factual side. And I just go over my resume. Here's what I've done. I'm a doer. I'm a fixer. I'm not one of the ideologues that screams and yells and calls the other person Satan, because that doesn't accomplish anything. We have to realize we're here for a bigger reason than ourselves. It's for our country and to make our country better for our kids and our grandkids.
So how do you lobby to an administration that, let's say, you feel does not have the people's best interests at heart, sending all this money across to different countries and supporting wars that, let's say, most of the people here don't really even understand?
Yeah, it's Congress's fault in large part because they provide the purse strings. They fund it. They could easily go in tomorrow and say, we are going to pass a bill saying we are not funding A, B, or C. But as you saw when President Trump got in, the Republicans wouldn't even help him on the border. They wouldn't even help fund a border wall for him. This is your own party. So it's so entrenched that you have to pick off these old timers one by one and just say, all right, you better not run again, or we're going to get a nice, normal candidate to run against you. So there are Congressman Mass, Congressman Mill, Congressman Bacon, my friend out in Nebraska, a bunch of congressmen that are like-minded as I, and we just get in together into the right caucuses, the Freedom Caucus, and other fiscally conservative caucuses, and we kind of force that effort on that. You have to say no to your own leadership if it's not good for your district.
Okay.
And a lot of people won't do that, unfortunately.
Right, because they're already
So let alone fighting against the Democrats. You got to fight uphill against your own party, because they have a vested interest in continuing the spending and continuing, well, if the Democrats are giving away money, we have to give away more, right? The Supreme Court already ruled that these student loan payments are unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Yet they still go on.
Well, I mean, I guess both sides do that stuff. I mean, they impeached Trump when they knew it wasn't going to pass. They impeached Biden when they knew it wasn't going to pass. I mean, the whole thing's a chess game that I guess maybe I'm normal in the sense, like you said earlier, that, I look at it and go, man, how am I going to affect that?
Well, I'll give you an example.
And then I take care of my family and my business and my
people
close
just turn
friends.
it off.
And
turn off the news. That's what people do. My opponent, they all say they care about the environment, but she wasted so much paper trying to keep President Trump off the ballot. Introduced legislation saying because of Trump is a bad guy, he shouldn't even be on the ballot.
Yeah.
So she wasted all that time. How does that help her district at all? Yeah. It doesn't. And that's what people get fed up on. These people are having a hard time paying their bills. I just had a call from somebody whose water was shut off. Their water was shut off. They can't afford their water bill. You think he cares about what my opponent's doing to keep President Trump off the ballot? So it's frustrating. And people are frustrated out there. And I think this is going to be a sea change of an election for more normalcy, especially down here in South Florida. People want somebody to represent them and not the vested interests on both sides. I've been very visible out in the community, and we have billboards going up here next month and more digital media to reach those people that aren't really engaged.
They're not paying attention
in politics, just to say, hey.
And I mean, I wouldn't even know you existed had I not met you. So I get where you're going with that.
So you got to be involved, and then once people research my background, I don't think they're disappointed. They're not going to find dirt. Our families lived a solid life. We're very middle of the road. Obviously we're a conservative family, but we don't go out there and make waves, and we want our country to succeed. We want our town to succeed. Broward County is largely run by Democrats at the county commission. I know all of them. We probably disagree a little bit on things, but they're focused on local issues. The same with your city commissioners. They might be Democrats, but they hopefully are focused on potholes, streetlights.
What are some of the issues that you and they talk about that you say, okay, that's a local issue that's really important and some action needs to be taken?
Yeah,
so give me an example.
Housing's huge here in South Florida. We were just presented with a briefing from the Florida Chamber of Commerce that showed that younger couples in Broward are moving out. So how our population's growing, but the younger workforce is moving out because they can't afford to live here. And the older retirees are moving out because they're cashing out, or if they're renting, they can't afford to live here. So the only people moving in seem to be the well-to-do ones.
From all over the country.
All over the country and from Latin America.
Correct.
So the number one issue there is housing and affordability. In Weston, we're pretty much built out. We do have some developments come in. Hollywood's putting in 2,000 to 3,000 rental units coming in soon. But the demand is so high here. So that's what people are, I hear what's going on, the housing prices, but it's supply and demand, right? So the local officials are concerned about that, and they say, all right, how can we spur private investment to come down here and build without being too bureaucratic, while still taking care of the resources, because we got to make sure we have enough water. With sea level rising, we have to make sure that the salt water doesn't encroach on our water table, right? That wouldn't be good. And that we're not overbuilding. So you kind of balance that. And all the commissioners, when I talk to them and the mayors, we don't talk politics, honestly. We talk about the housing situation, inflation, transportation, with the light rail coming in along Fort Lauderdale corridor too into the port, and how to make it here more affordable for young families to want to come here. Like our teachers, right? They start out $50,000 a year, 50-something thousand. What are you getting for that? You can't afford a house on that. And when your rent's $2,700 a month, it doesn't provide the incentive for people to move here and become a teacher.
Yeah. Right? I got you.
So I think we just need to reduce our bureaucracy at that management level across all places, all levels of government, and funnel more of that money down to the people that really have an impact.
Okay. No, I mean, I think this is interesting stuff.
I know it's not controversial.
Look, and we can get controversial. I don't care. I'd rather, take shots at Biden, take shots at Trump, take shots at everybody, take shots at Debbie for all I care. I mean, people want some sort of meat to it, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate the logic and linear thinking, but like, give us like a, how would you figure out a way to help with the whole inflation situation?
It's spending.
Yeah.
My mom's 93, living in New York with my brother and sister up there. And she doesn't understand modern monetary theory. She doesn't understand the Federal Reserve. But she goes, why is the eggs doubled?
Yeah.
Tripled. It's because there's too much money in the system, right? Too much money chasing too few dollars. And that's because Congress, with the president pushing that post-COVID $1 trillion through, infrastructure, which wasn't infrastructure if you look at it, and that flooded the market with money. And now they want to build electrical vehicle charging stations around the country, spend billions of dollars, and they've built 8 so far, the efficiency of the federal government. You're flooding money into the system that doesn't need it or wants it, but it doesn't need it. Yeah. The U.S. government didn't fund one gas station across this country, yet for some reason feels the need to fund electrical vehicle charging. I have electrical vehicles. I love them. Sure. Nobody told me to buy them. It wasn't a mandate. I'm against mandates. And I don't think the federal government should be involved in that. So you say, what can we cut back to cut down inflation? Boom. That's an easy one.
I mean, the federal government shouldn't be involved in 90% of what they argue about, so in my opinion.
It's the Congress that authorizes this money on both sides, right? There's always Republicans that seem to be going over to the other side. Well, this has something in it for my district, so.
Well, can we get to a point where they have to issue bonds to pass laws again, like they had 200 and whatever years ago?
I wish we could have they have a so-called pay-as-you-go, right? You can't pass a bill unless you show you're going to help pay for it. It's all a scam.
Yeah, right.
That whole debt limit thing that comes up every year.
Yeah.
Oh, the government's going to shut down. That's a big scam, right? It always passes. People, it's just politics.
It's just
the Republicans are going to shut down government. Daycares are going to close. Oh my God. It's all a scam. It is. And we just got to quit spending so much money. That's what it is. Otherwise, we're not going to have enough money for Social Security. We need to protect our most vulnerable.
So wild.
We just saw a couple of homeless people yesterday in Hollywood. I was on my way to the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce last night, and could be drugs or alcohol, but the guy had a nicer cell phone than I did, right? Where do they get that kind of money? If it's the Obama phones they're still giving out, why is the U.S. government paying for this stuff?
Yeah, aka the taxpayers paying for this stuff. Yeah, of course.
I mean, you're paying for your neighbors, whatever. If you get $7,000 off your Tesla, your neighbor's helping you pay for that. You just thank your neighbor on your way out.
That's right. So what's next on your campaign trail? What events do you have? What
we have a huge event in Hollywood coming up in June. 45. The Israeli community is very big here in South Florida. Very concerned with this administration, especially Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz and her support of the Iranian deal under the Obama administration. You might remember they showed up with pallets of cash in Tehran airport in the middle of the night. That's what Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz approved under Obama to help curry favor with them, so they would sign a nuclear agreement. And you could trust Iran, right? Sure. What are they going to do with that billions of dollars? Buy diapers? And
we don't even trust our own government. You want us to trust the Iranian government?
In fact, this administration continues to give sanction waivers to Iran to the tune of at least $10 billion a year, and sanction waivers to them. So now they're foreign. You know how President Trump was starving Iran out of money, out of foreign reserves, to hopefully change their behavior. Now they got hundreds of billions of dollars thanks to this administration, allowing them to sell oil here and there, and they want to curry favor with them to say, "Oh, will you come back to the negotiating table, please? Because we want to help with your nuclear program." And now there's reports that the administration's pressuring European nations to not go hard on Iran on its nuclear program. We want to have another deal. Iran's a bully. They fund Hamas, they fund Hezbollah, and the Israeli community here in South Florida is concerned, rightfully so, that there'll be more attacks on Israel if we don't take out Hamas. All funded through the help of this administration. We spent over $300 million on a floating pier that doesn't work, that sank, that broke. $300 million? This is the first war in history where we're feeding the enemy. We're feeding Hamas. None of that aid went to where it's supposed to go. Hamas took it all.
So how are these people not all hanging on the courthouse lawn?
Why is it such a surprise? There's no accountability in Washington.
So
none.
But how does that change that?
Unless you're Republicans, then there's accountability.
I mean, I would put 90% of them in jail tomorrow if I had my choice.
You have to hold them accountable. Now, if it's illegal, it should be in jail. If it's stupidity, you need to be fired.
Well, can't we just send them to a foreign country? Didn't we used to send people to foreign countries back in the day or something?
You know what the problem, especially we spent a 300-something million of the military's money to build a floating pier to help out Hamas, and we're running short on our recruiting goals. We're worried about pronouns and not winning wars, and we have taken from our own military stockpiles to help out Israel and Ukraine. So we're short of weapons, which President Biden told China, "Hey, by the way, we're depleting our own stockpiles, just so you know." He said it on TV, and I don't know if China has TV or not over there.
Probably not.
They might have heard that.
Probably not.
So if you're trying to deter China from going against Taiwan, why would you say we're depleting our stockpiles? And know that when President Obama withheld weapons from Iran to go, he said, "Well, if you use these against Rafah, we're not going to give them to you." So he's micromanaging a war he knows nothing about, by the way. Don't you think that sends a message to China and Russia? Oh, look, the U.S. could be pressured into not providing armaments to its allies in a critical time.
That's bizarre.
I had I won't give you the name, but a high-ranking Israeli official tell us that if they went into Rafah, it'd be like a 4-week operation, just to eliminate the 2 or 3 remaining Hamas battalions that are there. They know where they are. But they're worried about, would the U.S. stop aid? Why should our strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel, be worried that the U.S. doesn't have its back? So the Israeli community, predominantly all over the district, but in Hollywood and in Weston, are very concerned about that. Not only Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz's previous support for Iran, but that she's equivocating now and wants it both ways, because she wants the Muslim vote, just like President Biden wants the Muslim vote. Go, oh, well, you know what? You better not shoot that bullet over there. You better shoot it over here.
Wow.
So it's very, very disturbing. And, the Israeli community the Jewish community typically votes Democrat. But I think this time you're going to see a sea change, that they are fed up with this administration's support for Hamas over Israel in many cases.
So that could be something that swings in your favor then.
Yeah, for sure. 1/3 of my voters are Hispanic, right? Okay. So that demographic has certainly changed. And Hispanic community is largely conservative, family-oriented. We're going to get vast majority.
Leave us alone. We're going to run our families. And
leave us alone. Yeah. That's what most people want to be left alone.
Yeah, sure.
They don't dictate to them how to run their family or what their kids can or cannot do. Like in California, they're taking kids away from their parents if the parents refuse to give them transgender surgeries. Craziness. So people are seeing
stuff like that, and I don't want to believe that it's real, because it just doesn't. It doesn't make any
California,
sense at all.
They always say, is the trendsetter for the nation.
Yeah,
so luckily we have a strong governor and won't let that happen here. But the Israeli Jewish population in South Florida is is fed up.
Oh yeah, I mean, I grew up in Cooper City, and most of my friends were Jewish, and some of them were Israeli. Yeah. I was kind of the token Gentile in the group, but
well, I've had 3 rabbis.
We had a huge Jewish population.
Last 3 weeks, school. 3 rabbis have told me that they're supporting me, and they're telling the congregation they can't do it officially, right? Obviously, it's a house of worship, but behind the scenes, talk and whispering that they do, we're getting that kind of support. From the religious community on all sides. So we're very glad to hear that. Now, they're not going to come out publicly because they'll get canceled, right?
Jeez.
We have 7 elected Democrats supporting our campaign in Broward County.
Okay.
They're not going to come out publicly because they'll get canceled. And there's 2 reasons. One, they don't like her because they had run-ins with her and she's known as having a hot temper,
okay,
put it mildly. And the other ones are not really Democrats, but they had to be Democrat to get elected in their position. So they're closet Republicans. Okay. So we're very grateful for their support. They might have their picture taken with her, blah, blah, blah. But that whisper campaign, which is why I won so heavily in Weston, is going to do monumental things for us going forward.
Okay. Well, hey, Chris, man, I wish you luck. We'll invite you back to promote any of these events.
I got one recommendation.
Please.
For this. You should have like a blood pressure cuff on your gas, because I could tell my blood pressure's getting
I was gonna say we might have to like give you less espresso next time. I did not give Chris Eddy an espresso. He said no, thank you. So, but no, I appreciate you taking the time. You're welcome to promote any of your events. Like I told you from day one, I think anybody running that has not been in politics and has some logic to, helping the people that they're allegedly serving in a lot of cases, unseating somebody who's been there forever, I'm a fan. So
I'll give you one final note. If they could go to my website too,
Eddy, go
EDDY, Eddy 4, the number 4, Congress.com. You see everything on there: podcasts, videos, commercials, press releases. I'm not a politician, so I tend to speak what's on my mind.
Okay.
And you'll see my blogs on there. You can obviously donate. Before you donate to any candidate, just do a quick Google search to see what that campaign spends their money on. Like my opponent, she spent $1.2 million already in this campaign.
Yeah.
Most of the money that you give to candidates goes to fundraisers, companies that professionally fundraise, or consultants. You think you're helping to buy a yard sign or that.
You're paying
You're paying other people and people on their payroll. We don't do that in our campaign. I have my campaign manager. Everything else is provided in kind through friends and professionals that are fed up with the system. So we don't do the consultants that want $5,000 a month for messaging, to help me say what I need to say.
Right.
So if you're able to give $10 buys 1 yard sign, that helps us out.
Got it.
We're very my wife calls me cheap.
Grassroots.
We're frugal.
Okay. Efficient with money.
We are very efficient. We've spent $100,000 that's 10 to 1, or that our opponent spent on, and I would argue that we got much more bang for our buck.
Well, there's 5% of politicians that probably still are that way, so you got a long way to turn the rest of them. But
I'll work on it.
We'll wish you luck, Chris. Thanks so much, man.
Always good seeing you.
Same here.